Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate. We're talking on the heels of that big charge sheet filed by Europe against internet giant Google. With us to talk about it, Jean-Manuel Rozan, co-founder of the Quant search engine, Emmanuel Vivier, co-founder of digital consulting firm The Hub Initiative, Christian Renard of digital consultants Axie Mark, and from Aalborg in Denmark, Jacques Lafitte of lobbying consultants Visa Partners, formerly with stints at both Microsoft and the European Commission. We were talking just before the break and about some of the charges that have been filed against Google. We talked about Emmanuel Vivier, this issue that Christian brought up, which was shopping, and how whether or not there's a case over Google squeezing out the competition, basically, when it comes to its shopping site. There's also issues that are brought up when it comes to mobile phones and the Android system. How serious are the charges there?
Android is definitely leading, so it has been pretty smart for Google to acquire this company and to now make it one of the leading operating system for mobile. But once again, people are allowed to use Android, and if you take Amazon, for example, they have used Android, repackaged it without Google search engine, without certain functionality to operate their Kindle Fire tablet and phones. So it's not as close as it might be for Apple. So Apple is not as big, but they're generating more revenues. People are buying more on iOS from Apple, so it's not that simple.
Jacques Lafitte, when you compare how dominant a position Microsoft had in the 1990s with how dominant position Google has today, which one's bigger?
Well, in terms of market share, it's broadly comparable. I think that on the desktop, in 2000, Microsoft had the market share for operating systems of around 92-94%. Today, on general search engines, Google's said to have a market share of about 90. It's roughly comparable. The big difference is that 15 years ago, Microsoft was said to monopolize your computer. What most people would say today is that the issue at stake with Google is much larger. It's about the entire internet. And eventually, if you're large, the issues to personal finance and health, it's about your entire life.
I was going to say, Christian Renard, Google owns YouTube, but it also owns Motorola, smartwatches, glasses. It's getting into healthcare, robots, renewable energy. It's a lot more than just a search engine. That's a big difference with previous giants in this field.
Yes, but if we put things in perspective, I mean, the growth of this digital planet is incredible, and Google started before everyone. Now you have French tech, for instance, here. They are very bright. You're going to have many competitors. You have Quant. You have a number of solutions. But the key thing is Google, all the GAFAs, Google, Facebook, Amazon, Apple, they have a different business model. We want the planet as customers. They pay or not, it's not important. And the second, they're obsessed by value creation. And this is something all the startups you have in Europe do the same thing. So I'm very optimistic that the other solutions will come. The question with Google is we don't want monopoly. The second thing that we didn't discuss is the most important thing is we want data in Europe. We don't want data in America. And this is not something that seems so hot, and it should be. I think
sorry, when you say we don't want data in Europe, we want data in Europe.
We need to have data in Europe.
We as Europeans.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
We don't want them in America. I'm not
and is this
sure.
with Edward Snowden and the NSA spying scandal that's exposed that?
It's not Android. It's your personal data. The key things, you want people to control the data, not the business. You want people. And you need trusted sources for data. So, okay, for the case with the Commission against Google, but I think all should be really balanced. Yes, you don't want a monopoly. We want to show our power, but let's address the right problem and let's not pull the brake to
and what do you think of their motto? Don't be evil.
You don't want them to be evil. So we need to control. We need. No. It's been done in
I think it's not the point of being evil or not. They are business, they are ambitious, they want to develop themselves. And of course, if they see that there is innovative ways, there is robotics, there is, I would say, biotechnology, they are going into it. And we have smart, small players into that in Europe. The question is, what's holding those small dynamic player to become digital giant like the GAFAs? And I think this is where the EU Commission should really look at. It's not by slowing Google, it's how can we accelerate our ecosystem of digital small leaders in Europe and make them become like Google.
All right, that's a point that was made in a very blunt fashion by the US president back in February, Barack Obama, granting an interview where he pointed the finger back at Europe.
In defense of Google and Facebook, sometimes the European response here is more commercially driven than anything else. Sometimes their vendors, their service providers, who can't compete with ours, are essentially trying to set up some roadblocks for our companies to operate effectively there. We have owned the internet. Oftentimes, what is portrayed as high-minded positions on issues sometimes is just designed to carve out some of their commercial interests, and that's something we have to talk about.
Point taken. Is he right, Barack Obama? That this is basically disguising under high-minded and lofty, talking about the interest of the people, that actually it's just competitors with sour grapes.
You need to break that argument into two pieces. What he says doesn't mean that it is not right for the legislator in Europe to want to create laws and regulation and to protect the European consumer, point number one. And number two, yes, there is a need for emerging companies in Europe to produce alternatives and to produce them the European way. Again, I'm sorry to always pull back the conversation to what we want to do at Quant, but that's precisely what we want to do. And the issue is not the size of the alternative. The issue is the quality of the alternative and the difference. And again, to come back to what you were saying, Mr. Renard, then of course it's very, very important that people retain power over their own data and that their own data is not used without their knowledge in different ways. So that's one of the things that we want to be not the whole solution for, but we want to be a break of that solution, definitely.
Jacques Lafitte, when you hear Barack Obama saying, we have owned the internet, how does that strike you?
Well, historically he's right. In the sense that the internet is very much a creation of the Pentagon. Now, when he speaks about what the Commission is currently doing, Mr. Obama would be a lot more credible if it wasn't so notoriously close to Google and to Mr. Eric Schmidt in particular, the president. It's not just that Google funds the Democratic Party. It's also that you have a lot of Google senior execs who have crossed the US and gone to the White House since 2008. It's so extreme in the case of Google that you have 98%, according to Wikipedia, 98% of the money given by Google to political parties in the US that goes to the Democratic camp. I've never heard about any figure comparable with any other company in the US ever.
Emmanuel Vivier, we were speaking with New Yorker staff writer George Packer just a couple of days ago, and he was telling us, how in America now, you can take on the banks, you can take on corporate tax avoidance even, but taking on Silicon Valley, no politician dares to do it.
But the thing is, it's kind of the growth engine of the US right now. Like Silicon Valley is really soaring. It's attracting talent from all over the planet. It's really helping developing the business, the jobs in the US, but even outside, because they're like conquering and becoming like a leading global player. So of course, it's pretty hard to fight that. They have money. They are using it in lobbies. That's for sure, and they are defending their field. But why would they really fight against that? Like, we would be happy to have the growth they had. We would be happy to have innovation like that. And it's not only Google. If you look at for example, Facebook, they are fighting against Google to grab some of the market share for the advertising budget, and they're pretty good at it. So even Google has competition, and they are not slipping, or it's not that the easy way for them.
Can there be a European Google?
I wish and I hope maybe in few years I could say, oh, I know the founder of Quant, but...
Yeah, but Quant, excuse me, no disrespect, Mr. Rozon, but, it's a search engine, right?
Yes.
Whereas Google is...
But it was a search engine first, and then they were able to do more. But I think, once again, what's holding us to become like Google? Tax, a regulation, no single easy market. We have euros, yes, but I don't know, business contract is different in Germany or in France, or job contract is different.
I'd like to say two things here. Just first of all, on your general remark about Silicon Valley, the world is multipolar, not unipolar. So obviously there's a very big pole of attraction for Silicon Valley, and it's great, and it's going to continue.
There's a lot of money there.
Yes, of course. But you have poles of excellence that are growing everywhere in the world. You have them in India, you have them in France, you have them in Bordeaux, Lyon, Marseille, and Paris, and the south of France. We have all our offices in Nice. And we are in the moment of, I would say, Darwinian disruption. The changes are like so big and so important and everywhere that it really doesn't matter anymore. And I think that, of course, you can say historically there was a moment when innovation was in the US, Silicon Valley was stronger, there was more money, there was one market where companies can grow fast, and therefore they came to dominate. But now there are solutions that are being invented everywhere. And so that world dominance will break down because of the multipolarity of the solutions and because of the size of the market that is emerging. So we, as far as we want to be part of that change.
But the problem is then we're getting back to the politicians. They can't follow where the market dominance is with this Darwinian disruption happening so fast and so quickly. They also can't follow the money because you're making profits in the country where you're not domiciled, and hence all the arguments we've seen over big corporations, many of whom are in the Silicon Valley, who really don't pay much tax at all here in Europe.
I think in France and in Europe, you have so many talents. We have French like, let's do the European business against America. There are many things coming up. It's like, in the spring, you see some seeds getting on. It comes everywhere. And I think Europe is very good in business. So back to...
Europe can be good in business, but are companies like Google getting a tax-free ride compared to the European companies that start up here?
It's not totally legitimate. I think that should be fixed. As we should control, back to the shopping, we should have some procedures to check if it's honest or not. I mean, it's not complex. This is technical. The big thing is let's use Google. Let's use all those tools. And let's be better in business than American corporations. This is not something that is impossible. There are incredible startups, incredible business everywhere from Europe. In Silicon Valley, I don't know the percentage, but how many of European talents and Asian talents in Silicon Valley? It's a lot. I mean,
but they're in Silicon Valley, they're not here.
Yeah. But about tax optimization, I think, that's not the role of Google to fix it. Like, they are optimizing as much as they can within the law. And if the law allows them to do that, then we need to fix the law. And that should be the job of the European Commission. That should be the job of the Senate, not to slow down Google, but to fix it, to make it fair for everyone to compete.
So Jacques Lafitte, that brings us back to the question I asked you about Margaret de Vestager, the new commissioner on the matter, which is, does Brussels understand the digital economy better than it did before?
Well, I think so. Allow me to play spokesman of the Juncker Commission for a second. We have the antitrust front. Something has just happened. We have the tax avoidance front, which translate into state aid inquiries. Same Margaret Vestager is currently handling that. And then we have the entire regulatory field. And the digital single market is priority number one of the Juncker Commission right now. And it's going to go into geo-blocking. It's going to go into copyright reform, is going to go into many other aspects of not just the tube issues, the technology, but also the content industries behind them. And we also have a very active commission in terms of establishing a better level playing field on the taxation side. I thought we would speak more about the antitrust case today, but the Commission is going to come up very soon with a proposal to ensure complete transparency in terms of taxation. Where do companies make business and where do they actually pay their taxes? It's all the Commission can do, because taxation is inherently a national matter. Last but not least, we have data. I heard someone say before that we Europeans want the data to stay in Europe. When I was at Microsoft 15 years ago, the big debate was the so-called safe harbor, which enabled, to cut the long story short, US companies to transfer European data to the US without, let's be honest, too much control. If my information is anything to go by, I think that the safe harbor will be a thing of the past very soon. So it's moving on all fronts.
All right. Google, though, has, again, we were saying, very powerful. It's become a verb, as we said, to Google things. It's used in everyday parlance. In 2013, it was also a major Hollywood motion picture.
Welcome to Google. This will not be your average internship.
We're looking at some sort of mental Hunger Games against a bunch of genius kids for just like a handful of jobs.
That's a Sharpie, by the way, genius.
Culture.
That's my fault.
Infomercial, said critics. And again, Emmanuel Vivier, there's the power of money. We've talked about it. There's also a lot of soft power, which is very important behind this brand.
I think behind all those companies, it's a success to attract talents. And yes, part of it is money, definitely, but part of it is speed of innovation and even like a lot of perks for their salaries, so for their employees, so they only focus on jobs because, you know, they're, everything is taken care for them. And you know, they are competing against each other. So if Google doesn't offer those perks, Facebook will offer them. If Facebook won't, then it will be Yahoo or it will be like other companies.
So Jean-Manuel Rozan, how many employees have you got?
We have approximately 50 and growing, of course.
50 and growing. How do you make your company hip for?
Well, we hope by the relevance of the result, by the cool design, by the quality of the service we give to customers.
But I mean, do you have like the little foosball tables and the kind of things that they have in the Silicon Valley?
No, we don't do that. We have great people that are young and passionate and innovative and super competent from a technological point of view. But if you ask me what is our path is to be very relevant when we give answers in France and in Germany, to grow in France and Germany, to be super relevant also very fast in all of Europe. That's almost done. And then to attract, because we want to create a virtuous circle, to attract larger shareholders that can help us to be distributed all over Europe, and then we'll take it from there.
So you can do all that while having boring office cubicles.
We have 3 offices. We have a very boring office in Paris. We have a very hip office in Nice where we have most of our people. And we have the super cool office in Rouen where, unfortunately, we only have 6 people.
Okay, well, maybe that's a call to go to Normandy then. A final word on this, Jacques Lafitte. Your thoughts on that, on how to make Europe attractive?
Well, let me say maybe something about the consequences of what just happened yesterday, this announcement of a statement injections against Google. I think it's in itself a game changer. Of course, the antitrust investigation is going to go on for another probably 2 years, and then it will go on appeal, and we'll have the final decision by the Court of Justice probably 8 years from now, if not more. Now, history shows that large companies, when they receive a statement injection, start to change their behavior. Also, I think it's a very safe bet that there will be a lot more of litigation, damage claims all around Europe very soon. Actually, in the UK, it has started. There is an ongoing case in front of the High Court of England in Wales, that could easily lead to a decision awarding potentially big damages to a company called StreetMap well before we have the final decision of the European Commission in 2 years' time. This is something that will keep, hopefully, will keep Google a lot more honest going forward.
All right, so Google kept honest here on European shores and perhaps with worldwide consequences. I want to thank you, Jacques Lafitte, for joining us from Aalborg in Denmark. I want to thank our panelists here in the studio, Jean-Manuel Rozan, Emmanuel Vivier, and Christian Renard. Stay with us. Our Media Watch segment is next. And here he is, James Creedon. How are you,
Francois? Sir? Very well. Lots of, obviously, reaction on Google search, well, websites that I found via Google.
What search engine did you use today?
Well, that's it. I mean, it is, and we'll get to that. It is very...
You did not use Quant?
No.
And you would put Google, you would put EU, you would find out everything about what it is on the internet, and you would also find in the social column what everyone says about it.
Tomorrow's chronique, I will prepare it
Thank you.
On your search engine.
Got it.
So just to show you some of the reactions, EU attacks Google for being successful, says Techno Guido. That's, and that is actually the tone of a lot of the response coming even from some of the European media. This article in The Economist, should digital monopolies be broken up? From their point of view, over at The Economist, this is a form of Google phobia, and European moves against Google are about protecting companies, not consumers. So that's the point of view over in London. Elsewhere, CNBC, so taking a look at the perspective coming out of the US, is clueless Europe going to destroy Google?
Oh dear.
And this is the point of view of Trip Chowdhury, who is the managing director of Global Equities Research. He says the EU is totally clueless. They risk destroying the company, and this is a big mistake, and it's a form of protectionism. So you're seeing a lot of this on the media, in terms of the media reaction. The Atlantic making one very interesting point. They say it sure seems like Europe isn't fond of Google, but the irony is that Europe is in fact very fond of Google, and that over 90% of searches take place on Google. If you look at countries like Belgium, Germany and Finland, that can go up to 97%.
Whereas it's 70% in the US.
That's right, because Bing is much more used than it is here. I think this cartoon, which I believe was on the Financial Times, sort of sums that up.
It's banks, yeah.
You see EU commissioners, when I Google anti-competitiveness, I get Google. There you go. I suppose that sort of sums up that slight irony there. Google versus the EU commissioner. Is this a David versus Goliath struggle? And the Independent is looking really at the person of the EU competition commissioner, Margaret Vestager. She has more or less said that this is about protecting consumers. So even if, for example, The Economist says it's all about companies, she's really saying this is about protecting the little guy. And indeed, there have been a lot of small business owners and others saying that Google Shopping, if you don't pay them, of course this is all centering on Google Shopping, you just don't feature. Now, it's interesting to see that in a response to this EU charge on a blog on Google, they went into the whole area of news. Now, news isn't in the spotlight of this current EU charge, but essentially they fibbed on a blog, saying, well, actually people point the finger of blame at Google, saying that even in the domain of news, that we are responsible for directing site towards news websites. But in fact, if you look at The Guardian, or if you look at Bild, only 10% of their hits come via Google. Up to 85% come from people directly going to their websites. Those figures on a Google blog were completely fictitious, as pointed out by Chris Moran, who is the audience editor for The Guardian. And The Guardian was pretty much vociferous about that, and Google did later retract those figures and apologize. So it seems that there might be a little bit of fibbing going on in Google's attempts to defend itself against these charges. Just a couple of more lighter items to finish with. Francois. Carl Sharrow on Twitter saying, it seems the EU is intent on breaking up Google. I hope they name the two companies Go and Oogle, which I think actually was the origins of the name Google, well, one of the theories. And you're seeing graphics like that as well appearing across Google, across Twitter, rather. And
not so much on Google.
No, not so much on Google. And this is one German newspaper's cartoonist's interpretation of what's going on at the EU, lassoing the many-tentacled Google.
All right, you'll be lassoing more stories for us later. Many thanks, James Green. I want to thank our panel once again for being with us. Thank you for joining us here in the France 24 debate.